Oh, this isn't.
Okay, welcome to the April 29th, 2026 Planning Committee LRPC meeting on the Climate Action Plan, CAP, and the Special General Land Use Plan LUP Study Report. We will be holding a hybrid public meeting which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia per the Planning Commission's electronic meeting policy adopted July 7th, 2022. Do we have any planning commission? Why not?
I don't see anyone yet.
Okay,
Don't keep
so
with it.
all members of the LRPC are meeting here in person. Thank you. This meeting is being recorded for our public records and will be posted on the Arlington County Commission meeting YouTube page. Avoid sharing any personal information that you would not like to be made public. At this time, I'd like to orient everyone to our hybrid environment and cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will run. Members of the public may attend the meeting here in person or electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link provided on the LRPC web pages, the county's events calendar, and the email notification sent to LRPC email subscribers. Additionally, there is a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. For our virtual attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed. I will address when it's appropriate to turn it on in a moment if you sign up for public comment. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat is active to serve two purposes: to assist participants who need technical support and for participants to pose brief clarifying questions to the larger audience. While the clarifying questions will be monitored, they will not be formally acknowledged. Staff may address these comments as appropriate. The Teams chat should not be used for discussion or inappropriate statements. Those who are planning to provide public comment may do so at the end of the meeting, as the chat may not be used for that purpose. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public testimony period. I would like to remind everyone in the room to speak up, speak slowly and clearly, and point to the microphones to allow virtual participants to hear you. Additional notes for LRPC members: if commissioners participating, well, we don't have anyone virtually. Unlike the Planning Commission's regular meetings and hearings, the LRPC agenda items are not public hearings. Therefore, public comment is at the LRPC chair's discretion. I will call for speakers at the end of each agenda item after the committee discussion has concluded, and members of the public attending virtually will speak first, followed by in-person attendees. The speaking time allotted will depend on the number of speakers we have this evening. In-person attendees, please add your name to the speakers list on the table. Virtual attendees, please indicate in the chat that you'd like to provide comment, and your name will be added to our list of speakers. Ms. Alfonso Ahmed will acknowledge your request in the Teams chat. When virtual attendees are called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that is located on your meeting command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you. You will be muted when your time has concluded. As an alternative, public comment may also be provided on the public comment form posted on the LRPC webpage. Lastly, this is a public forum. Tonight's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act requirements. So we can get started with our first agenda item. So Alfonso, can you call that, please?
Sure. This is the special LUP study report, and we've got Jen, who just popped up online. She's
Natasha and LRPC members, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. Jennifer Smith with the Planning Division, and I am joined here with Matt Ladd, also from the Planning Division as well. What we're hoping to do is to provide a brief overview of our report that we just provided to the county board. We shared that with you last week, and hopefully the LRPC members will have had an opportunity to look over the report. I will just go over some key highlights from that, and then we would welcome the remaining time that we have to see if we can be responsive to any questions that you may have. Matt, thank you for pulling up the slides. You can go to the next slide. So by way of background, the Arlington County Special General Land Use Plan study process was created in 2008. It was developed by the county in response to the county board to guide how requested general land use plan changes that are tied to site plan proposals are reviewed, and with an emphasis on evaluation and public input ahead of specific site plan application reviews. Over time, stakeholders have raised differing concerns, including requests for stronger community influence, criticism of studying individual sites is not comprehensive and not the appropriate way to determine a land use vision, and some have had frustration with the long timelines that also increase cost and risk for applicants. Here you can see our process again is to determine the appropriateness of the requested general land use plan change. Staff frequently brings to the forefront for discussion other land use designations that may be appropriate in the context of a site and with the based on what the applicant is also seeking. We've been doing that in partnership with LRPC and also involving other community stakeholders to the table for discussion. We are really striving to achieve high-level planning analysis focused on land use, transportation, public space, housing, sustainability. Building forum is a piece of that as well. And the outcomes give us a way to engage the community and partners in future land use discussions in a way that is ahead of specific site plan applications. Next slide, please. The goal of this review, we were responsive to the county board who was seeking more information on the process and some of the responses that the concerns that had been elevated over time. So we're clear in this report that we are objectively seeking to assess the benefits and the challenges of the current process and also identify improvements. We want to make sure, however, that we are maintaining an efficient review through these studies with meaningful community engagement and also upholding the county board's policy. So the report contents approximately 39-40 pages. We do have some detailed information in tabular format about applications. We have different infographics and images to help round out the text. We cover the background and the process by which applications are reviewed. And because we've had multiple process shifts since 2008, we have shared information about what that process evolution has looked like. We've had 22 applications to date, with 16 of those coming forward for action to the county board, either to recommend advertisement of a general land use plan or to not recommend. More details about each study's timelines and our interactions with LRPC are detailed in the report. And again, sharing different perspectives on the issues. We talk about study benefits. We have also drawn out 4 near-term refinements to the process that we're proceeding with. And then again, we touch on conclusions, reinforcing the benefits of the study process and again, some details about the 22 applications. In terms of the benefits of the special GLUP study process, clearly it allows for broad community input to consider the appropriate land use vision, provides a forum to consider high-level planning guidance without the distraction of a site-specific design proposal, gives us an opportunity to evaluate land use and scale, allows for thorough planning analysis to account for basic planning elements that are in the comprehensive plan to make reasoned recommendation for potential change to the land use. Provides for more streamlined and efficient SPRC process on the back end for projects that have already undergone a special GLUP study. And we also, as mentioned, address appropriate building height and form recommendations. So despite some of the critiques that we've heard, we consider that it's an important planning tool that enables redevelopment of sites that might otherwise would not have had a path for a change without a costly or time-intensive area or sector plan updates. So just to touch on some of the near-term improvements here, which are really key to this report. Some of these should be familiar with those of you who have been participating for the last 2 special GLUP study applications, but we are formalizing here to bring forward a hybrid tier 1 and tier 2 review option. We need to establish a new fee for that, which we intend to do at some point this year. Timeline is yet to be determined on that. We are intending to continue to move towards a more focused GLUP study document, which you have seen recently. We are establishing a new appeal process that would allow an applicant to seek county board support to move from the tier 1 review directly to a site plan review without a tier 2 review, which would have been staff's recommendation. So that appeal would, if the board were to support that, they would be able to move forward to the site plan application phase. And then fourthly, the option to allow applicants to pursue early development review simultaneous or overlapping with the conclusion of the special GLUP study phase. And this may truncate their timeframes by a few months. Obviously, that would be at their own risk without the conclusion of the special general land use plan study. So again, just to draw some conclusion about what is included in the report is that we are planning to move forward with these 4 refinements. Some of them still have additional work, like the fee I mentioned, introducing this new appeal process into our administrative guide. Those are 2 things that we'll need to complete this year. But we're not recommending any major changes to the process at this time. And any restructuring to the process, we would be doing it in consultation with LRPC as we are here with the board. And we may have an opportunity to do that either as part of the ongoing comprehensive plan update process or as an opportunity soon thereafter. So with that, I'm happy to address any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Smith. So why don't we quickly go around the room and introduce ourselves just for the benefit of anybody who's watching virtually, and then we can get into our questions about the report and then a discussion about the 4 recommendations. So I'm Tenley Peterson, chair of the LRPC and a member of the Planning Commission.
Adriana Torres, Planning Commission.
Here, Shenners, Park and Rec Commission. David Howell, Forestry and Natural Resources Commission. I'm not actually here. I don't see you.
Here we go. The invisible man.
Right.
Paula Modelo, Planning Commission. Nia Bagley, Planning Commission.
Eric Berkey with the Planning Commission.
Rich Dooley, Director of Climate Policy for the county.
Natasha Folsom with the Planning Division.
Tony Flores with the Planning. We're just doing introductions.
Great. Jennifer Fioretti at Climate Policy Office.
Nick Cummings, Walsh Colucci.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll start off with questions about the report, and then we'll go into the 4 recommendations and see if we have questions or comments about that. So any of my planning commissioners have questions about the report?
Can I, super basic.
Yeah.
So forgive me for asking such a basic question. What problem or problems are we trying to solve here? Really, like in a nutshell, by undertaking this review at all?
Ms. Smith, can you address the reason
for
for
Jen.
this
Yeah.
report?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. Again, the county board asked us to conduct this review, and some of the concerns that we were hearing were, is this process fair? Should communities where an application is occurring have greater influence over the outcomes than more broadly as we work in partnership with LRPC and with an expanded LRPC, certainly bringing local neighbors, host neighborhoods into the table. But you know, we're looking for broad and inclusive engagement, but there were some concerns about that. There was also some criticism in terms of, should we be doing studies one site at a time? Should we be looking more holistically or more for broader geography? And then there was also concerns over time in terms of how timely we were able to handle and conduct these studies. We've had some evolution in terms of how we have handled them from a staffing perspective. Very early on, we did not have dedicated staff resources. That's changed a little bit in the way that we have designed our or sort of fit this process into our work plan. While we can't predict what applications are going to come in, we have tried to reserve staff resources so that we're able to handle these in a timely manner. We have introduced fees over time, and we certainly had a swell of applications at several years, so that led to some backlog, and we have moved things through. So I think over time we have definitely decreased the review time, the wait time for applicants to have their application reviewed and moved to SPRC. So those are some of the issues that we were hearing over time, and the board asked us to look at that. And what we wanted to be able to share back with them in terms of, while it may not be fully predictable when an applicant submits an application, how quickly we're going to be able to look at it, or how long it takes, because every case by case is different. Then, what that means is that we're able to process the information and move along a little bit more quickly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so there are no further questions about the report. We can go on to the 4 recommendations. So questions or comments about the recommendation for a hybrid tier 1-2 review. We've already kind of piloted some of these, so this is just kind of formalizing the process and introducing a fee. And there are lots more details other than what I just said in the report. But so comments or questions about that?
Is the idea that in tier 1, then the process would end with staff, basically. They would make a determination. It doesn't go through the whole process. It doesn't go through the planning commission. It just goes straight. Does it go to the board?
I believe we still review it. It would just be 1 meeting instead of possibly 2.
We still review it.
Yes. Is that correct, Ms. Smith?
Sorry, just to clarify the question, are you speaking about the recommendation for a hybrid review?
Yeah, the hybrid tier 2 process. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So what we have done on 2 occasions, and we would anticipate having the opportunity to do again in the future, is when we get an application and we feel like the review either has some foundation in terms of it has some relationship, it has some level of consistency with an adopted plan, but it may need the actual land use designation change. And that was seen by the most recent study for 2847, where the site was partially within the Clarendon Revitalization District, but partially out. And however, we could really draw to the Clarendon sector plan and say, we were envisioning redevelopment there, but we wanted to make sure that through the LRPC process, we could validate that and think about the designation, the expansion for the portion of the site outside of the district. Think about the scale of development. In any event, we thought that we could do that through a hybrid review, a more collapsed, bring in some of those more detailed questions of a tier 2, but not necessarily separate that into 2 review processes. So that's what we're intending to do through the hybrid review, is be able to collapse those two steps into one. Certainly we would engage the community. We've done that through online engagement, and we would also meet with LRPC. We would still prepare a study report. We're not thinking that we're going to do that in all instances. It's really when we feel like a site, one, may have some grounding in an adopted plan, or the issues are just going to be more straightforward, less complex.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about the hybrid review? Okay, then we'll move on to the refined appeal process. Currently, applicants can only appeal if staff decides not to advance from tier 1 to tier 2. And the proposed update would allow appeals when staff decide to advance to a tier 2. Thoughts about that? An appeals
I
process?
mean, I don't know at what point I can make a comment about some of the dangers that I might see.
Oh, yeah,
in some of
questions or
this.
comments.
Okay. Like, so there is such a thing as application segmentation, where you would maybe split the parcel and then say this isn't actually tier 1. And then, but you're really meaning to do a tier 2 project, and you're just looking to do an easier, less complicated path. And so is there a kind of a way to protect the process from that? Or is there a way to look at the, like a cumulative impact test? If there's actually a larger ownership pattern assemblage, you know what I'm trying.
I can imagine what you're
This
thinking.
is for the hybrid. Yeah. This is
Yeah.
for the hybrid that we're talking about.
Right, so, right, because, you know, even in my own practice, you know, if you start to break, like you can phase things, right? So things look smaller, but they're actually bigger. And so and then you're creating a precedent through tier 1 that this is just part of that same initial process. And so how are you then protected from going into tier 2? Or not being, right, if there's an appeal process, how does that work? Is there a scenario?
Yeah, so I think the way I would answer to that question is a tier 1 review is going to allow staff to do some initial work on the application to really understand the application and really understand the context for the site, planning, objectives, and to really also understand, is this a site that makes sense for a fuller study, tier 2 study? And we have that conversation with the LRPC. There may be instances where, and part of the review of tier 1 is, again, should this proceed through a tier 2 review? Or is there a different kind of study that would be better suited to evaluate an application? I think the what if scenario that you are bringing attention to is, what if an applicant says, I want to just study half a site and not a full site? I think that's something that could be evaluated and really be drawn out through the tier 1 review. Under a hybrid condition, I think staff's analysis, we would be able to assess some of that information as to whether, at least from our perspective, whether a site like that was really eligible for a hybrid review or not.
And ultimately, the Planning Commission LRPC chair, or if there's a specific project chair, would weigh in on, like, well, I don't think that's appropriate. I wanted it to not be a hybrid process. And that could be a recommendation.
And in case there's an escalation for the second part or the second parcel, do you retroactively have the ability to evaluate the first part of the I'm just trying to understand the scenarios under which all of, so are you looking then at 2 different parcels, or are you then going back and saying this is actually one larger parcel? We now, whatever was there before, we can retroactively consider it.
I think once we approved or accepted a special GLUP study on one parcel, then then that could proceed. And then if there was a separate parcel next door, that would be its own special glut study if the area wasn't planned for, or if it needed a glut change. So we practically cancel out the previously approved study.
I would say that we do have a process also, and we have conducted 2 study plus, special glut study plus applications. This is the Washington Kirkwood area and Shirlington, where we were really dealing with multiple property owners, multiple properties. And in those instances, you know, the review and the reports prepared really led to, you know, essentially small area plans. So I think that there's some adaptability and flexibility that we have in this process to be able to screen an application and get LRPC feedback in terms of what's the best and the preferred, most reasonable way to look at the request, which may be, you know, the majority of those have been for individual sites, but there's been instances where multiple sites have been submitted.
Commissioner Bagley?
Yeah, hey, Jen, as a survivor of the Kirkwood, Washington Boulevard LUP Study Plus. So what we're talking about here tonight does not affect LUP Study Plus things. Is that what I'm hearing, or how does it affect it? And the reason I ask is because even when we started talking GLUPs and then SPR, you know, LRPCs and SPRCs, we were losing the neighbors left and right because it was a lot to comprehend. So the difference, so this is not affecting LUP Study Plus stuff?
That's correct. We have not focused any specific changes on those areas. It's been a number of years since we've conducted one of those. The one thing that I, you know, would say is a little bit of a caveat there in terms of, again, wanting to keep the review at a high level. We may not feel the need to dive as deep into planning issues on a future special GLUP Study Plus. That's to be determined, and that could then lead to a more streamlined study document.
So I haven't followed. So to follow that up then, when this is introduced then at a community level, assuming this all gets approved and is introduced to the community, there will be a differentiation because some of the community, especially in my neighborhood, having been GLUP survivors, will kind of want to know what is this? What's the difference? That kind of thing. Will it be clear? Because I'm just noticing nothing in here mentions, or I don't see it, LUP Study Plus. So I may just make the suggestion.
Yeah. We haven't brought forward any recommendations to change to the special GLUP Study Plus.
And maybe we should say that in here somewhere so that somebody knows, especially somebody who has been through the process, then they understand it's a different thing. Because even when some of us more experienced ones get into a meeting, usually staff has to break it down for us what GLUP Study Plus and GLUP Study means. And, you know, for those of us who see it a lot.
It's almost like we need a chart.
We need a flow chart or something.
Up for the Keybridge Marriott that shows like, these are the different options and
Yes.
here's what you would get on each option. Like,
Yeah, and again, because if the board is hearing, which I'm sure they are from the community in part of this, and is also probably from applicants, that simplifying it on a communicative level would be very helpful. I just think so. And can I ask another question?
Can I agree with that.
Yeah.
Like to associate myself.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I'm just saying. So let me ask another question, Jen. So if we go back to the,
Can I actually interject quickly? Because you said if this gets accepted, there isn't an accepted or not accepted. This is the report and the plan moving forward. And so we will not be voting on this as a planning.
oh, no, I know that. I'm saying if the board decides that this is what we're going with.
I think they already did. I think
They
that
did?
it was presented to them and then it's being presented to us and then it's being rolled out.
Okay.
Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct, Tenley.
So
We
just,
shared this with the board. And we will, yes, and we're sharing that with you tonight.
that's fine. So as long as when it's communicated to the community who, get affected by this. So let me ask on a different thing so I understand this better. Tier 1s, tier 2s, Glove Study Plus, regular Glove. 11th in Vermont, when that came in, that was a Glove study, not a plus, a Glove study. Then it went to an LRPC, then it went to an SPRC. So now it would go through the hybrid tier 1, tier 2 instead, correct?
No, just to be clear, we have tier 1. And if we, through the tier 1 review, we are really determining, should we proceed to a tier 2 review? That's been established since 2019. And we have fees for tier 1 and tier 2 review. The tier 2, the full review, tier 2 review is really the full planning evaluation. And then we develop the recommendation to whether to advertise a GLUP change or not, and we produce the study document.
So in hindsight,
What we're doing now is we're saying, to be flexible, to be adaptable, maybe not all studies need 2 separate tier 1, should we study or not, and then tier 2, we may be able to collapse that into one process, but we're not saying that's an across the board for all applications. It's really for less complex applications like the 6045 Wilson Boulevard Townhouse review that we did late last year. And then the 2847 Wilson application that we did and finished at the beginning of this year. Think about those are small sites,
yes,
less complex, one of which was already really grounded in a sector plan. And we thought that we did not need to break those into 2 separate steps. That's all we're indicating here is that we want to memorialize a hybrid process. And to memorialize it fully, we want to be able to insert that with an appropriate fee into the fee schedule. We don't have a hybrid process under review right now, or a hybrid application under review right now, but we know we needed to develop a fee process. Something like 11th and Vermont, that would have been under, I think that predated the tier 1 and tier 2 application process. But if we're thinking about an application like that now, presumably that would have been under a tier 1 that would have led to then a tier 2 application.
yes. Thank you. That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
And so since these are administrative changes, that's why we're not approving them. We're just listening to the administrative changes as a briefing, but we will be able to review and approve the appeals process once that is proposed. Is that right, Ms. Smith? And we will also review and approve the fee. And that would be next year.
We certainly would be sharing any proposed fees with the Planning Commission as part of our normal course of work. Whether those come in time with the budget, the full package of fee changes with the next year's budget, or on a different timeline. Yes, I would imagine that those would be brought forward to the Planning Commission. Changes to the administrative guide. I feel like we've outlined what that will be in this report. So I think it's really just sort of taking that and translating it into the administrative guide. I don't know that we, I think for a courtesy, yes, we would be sharing that with LRPC, whether we need a discussion on it. But I think as a courtesy, we can say, here's how the administrative guide has changed to account for this additional appeal after that would be an appeal after a tier 1 review.
Okay, perfect. I will update my notes because I had appeals process would come to us too. Okay, so the last 2 things we want to comment on quickly, and then we'll move on, would be the report's recommendation to streamline the study documents and the recommendation for proposal review overlap. So that is to allow the applicants to potentially consider some of the earlier steps of their SPRC application for their 4.1 application while the special GLUP process is still going on if they are willing to take that risk, in that, you know, the special might reject the idea, but if they are willing to take the risk, they could start some of the earlier steps. Commissioner Torres.
So my concern with these changes are, I'm wondering if there are enough resources within the staff, because it's right? And making the process, in my opinion, a bit more complicated makes it so that you do need more staff to make sure things are scheduled properly and clear for everyone. So that's one of my concerns. My second concern is it's almost like there's a contradiction between trying to get the community more involved and sort of rushing the projects as much as possible, because to get the community more involved, you normally need more time to get them engaged and or even figure out what each section of Arlington needs, how they need to get more engaged. We haven't really even talked about that or figured that out, and we're already complicating the process. So those are my two main concerns.
Thank you. Commissioner Murphy.
So I guess this is for Jen. So with the overlap, is the idea essentially if an applicant wants to take advantage of this as a time and money saver, they could, but maybe you wouldn't, like it's sort of an assumption of risk? Because I mean, I do share the concern that like it's hard enough kind of keeping things coordinated, and then if you've got dual reviews happening concurrently, like there could just be, even in a simple application, there could be complications with that. So is the idea essentially this would be something maybe the applicant would be requesting versus staff maybe pushing it?
Yes, that's definitely in keeping with some of the feedback that we heard. Some of you may be familiar that we have several stages of application submission for site plans, and there's a preliminary phase, and it's typically a technical review. Is the application complete? And I think that's probably where we would see this recommendation is removing the barrier, such that if an applicant feels like they have a sense of where the special GLUB study application is headed in terms of, is there seeming support for what they're proposing, they may choose to go ahead and submit really for that technical review. We would not be able to complete a full staff review in terms of consistency with the general land use plan until the conclusion of the general land use plan study. So it's not like that site plan application is going to move to SPRC ahead of the conclusion of the general land use plan study. So hopefully that makes sense. It's allowing probably a limited overlap of time for an applicant to get their technical drawings. And again, it's at risk without the conclusion, the definitive conclusion.
No, that makes sense. I mean, it's sort of, this is another move in the direction, in my view, of sort of staff seeking some more flexibility as it does its own work, but also working with applicants. And so if the applicant is sort of willing to take the risk, depending upon the project, and that makes sense to them, then I think it makes sense to have a less sort of regulated environment for staff. We have good staff. Let's let you guys do your jobs. And then ultimately it's going to depend upon the quality of the applicant. I see the thumbs up, the quality of the application, right? You know, the backstop ultimately is always the county board. It's got to pass muster there. So I think generally speaking, this goes in the right direction. I think the concerns about community input are always well-founded. I don't think that staff can really solve those. I think those are inherently a political question the board has to always address, which is what is the balance of community input in development, right, versus other priorities. Thanks.
And I think
yeah, I mean, I would say, also too, I mean, I think we have those factors under consideration, but I think at this moment in time, we see where there may be applications in the past that could have proceeded to submit for that technical application. We had, probably some barriers in the way. We're willing to, try this, trial it. If there's issues, we can elevate that and we can change course. But at the moment, I think that there's, opportunity to continue to have some overlap that, could be 30, 60 days. And some of that timeline is clearly important for, for the county, for the community. If a project is headed in a direction that, we think that is a good decision.
And I think it will be, our responsibility as planning commissioners to make sure that we are communicating clearly with applicants if at the special GLUP stage, we do not feel like the project is coming together. And for staff to really, if you're feeling like the project's not coming together, to advise the applicant, you are taking on a lot of risk, and really make sure that's clear, because in our special GLUP studies, there often is miscommunication or misunderstanding, I'd say, not miscommunication, about like, what are we discussing? These are big picture ideas, what's in the realm of possibility. But then if we also know, well, the applicant's already submitted their application, then maybe the cart's being put for the horse. But so I think as long as we take on the responsibility to make sure that the special GLUP process is run with, credibility, then we can have kind of the occasion where we have both application and special GLUP happen somewhat overlapped.
If you're on planning commission long enough, you've had a conversation with somebody going, I don't know, it's your risk, right? I mean, I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
I agree with your sentiment. Yeah.
Okay. So then I think we can move to public comment on this item. I think we just have one speaker signed up, Nick Cummings. So you have 2 minutes.
2 minutes. I will try to go quickly and be respectful of time. Good evening, Nick here, speaking on behalf of myself and really all of my clients and friends in the industry. I want to thank everyone who is working on this and call attention to 2 of the proposed reforms that I think are very welcome and thoughtful. First, I applaud staff for proposing to condense and simplify the actual GLUP study documents. As maybe one of the 24 people alive who regularly read these documents, please do reduce the amount of narrative explication, background analysis, and visioning to ease the staff burden and accelerate the entire review process. Focus instead on easily digestible maps and exhibits that clearly establish the recommended characteristics of the potential development. Things like height, density, circulation, open space, and massing. Studies will vary in complexity, but they're currently sometimes 40 to 200 pages and really should ideally be 10 to 30 of those. Second, I'm thrilled to see the staff is proposing to allow concurrent review of 4.1 application while a GLUP study is underway. It would of course be at the applicant's own risk, but it would save a lot of time, which is important if the GLUP process is to become more manageable for everybody involved. Right now, staff typically will not start to review or even accept an invoice 4.1 application until the county board adopts the actual GLUP study. There are months that go by between the end of LRPC, when everyone has a pretty good idea of how the GLUP study is going to come together, and the actual adoption of the study by the county board. Those 2 to 3 months are exactly what we need for that preliminary checklisting review, and that is all that staff is talking about doing, is that technical review of the application, not going to SPRC early. This helps address an ongoing and significant problem. Developers, on advice of counsel like me, have strategically avoided GLUP studies if at all possible because they have a reputation of taking way too long. It is the most broken process in the county. Time kills projects, and I've seen that with some of the studies I reviewed recently. I had the joy of going back through, like staff did, every single GLUP study over the past few years. We have multiple GLUP studies that didn't even result in a 4.1 submission, let alone an approval. In other instances, it's been several years between the submission of an application and an applicant being able to receive an approval and begin development of the property. Do you think that plans should be judged in part, at least, by whether or not they're realized, whether we see the built environment and the benefits that brings us? Both the efficiency.
Very
Okay.
much.
I can email it.
Yeah, email that for us. Okay, thank you. And we did receive other emails as well about the process update. So thank you very much for the presentation, Ms. Smith. So then we can move on to our next agenda item, the climate action plan, where we have Mr. Dooley and Ms. Fioretti.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everybody. I'm Rich Dooley, as I mentioned, Director of Climate Policy for the county in the Climate Policy Office, together with Ms. Fioretti, who leads the office as the Assistant County Manager for Climate Policy in our Climate Policy Office. So thanks to the Chair for the opportunity to provide you with an update on the county's ambitious initiative to develop its first comprehensive climate action plan. The new plan is going to build essentially on the Community Energy Plan, also known as the CEP, not to be confused with the Climate Action Plan, which will be the CAP. The CEP is currently an element of the Arlington Comprehensive Plan. By updating it with this process and replacing it, it'll be a broader, more integrated approach to addressing climate change. While the CEP currently has focused on climate mitigation and some resilience measures, the CAP will expand its scope to include additional sectors critical to achieving a sustainable and resilient future, such as the circular economy and healthy ecosystems. Our overall project and process to develop the Climate Action Plan is synthesized by the acronym in our project logo shown on this slide, ACT, which stands for Arlington Climate Together. That acronym highlights the fact that everyone in our community has a role to play to address the impacts of climate change. So we're providing this project information item to multiple county advisory groups to let you and others know that the project is underway. During the course of this presentation tonight, we'll cover the process and overall project timeline toward developing the CAP. We'll highlight our engagement efforts to ensure the project deliverables are relevant to everyone in our community. Then we want to hear from you. We've created some questions to help us frame the Climate Action Plan in a way that's meaningful and relatable to all that is happening in the county per our comprehensive plan. And then lastly, we'll also describe the short-term next steps to get this task underway with our preferred consultant. So before I proceed, just want to thank the numerous people in the county departments and our consulting team who have gotten us to this stage of project development. I'd be here all day if we listed everyone, but up on screen here are some of the key players that have been tracking this project from the start and do so essentially on a daily basis. Ms. Fioretti, as noted here, as project director. We also have Rena Lara in our climate policy office. She's leading the communications and engagement arm of this project. Also in DPR, we have Jennifer Souls, and in Department of Environmental Services on the air team is Drew Stilson. And then also we do have representatives from our consulting team, which is AECOM for this project, helping us through this 18 to 24 month project. And you see the representatives there who we work with essentially on a daily basis. In addition to the staff core team, we also have an interdepartmental working group comprised of staff from multiple county departments. We're all in this together, and it's important that all county departments are involved in the plan's creation as well as its implementation. Our project's advisory groups representatives come from 18 different advisory and community groups and businesses in the county. Cindy Lewin, our C2E2 chair, is that group's co-chair, and we appreciate Mr. Howell representing FNRC and being part of the group as well. We greatly appreciate that, as well as all the representatives on that group. Now, climate change impacts each location in the world differently. In the next few slides, we're going to highlight the main hazards we'll focus on with this project that are most relevant to Arlington County. So a lot of information going on in this slide. Essentially, the DC area's average temperature since the late 1800s on the left-hand side of this slide has followed a general yet alarming trend. As you move from the left to the right, that red plot line shows an overall trend indicating that back in the 1870s, the temperature was around 54 degrees for the entire year. But since then, the average annual temperature denoted by that red line has risen to close to 60 degrees. Compare that to 1970 here in DC. We've been having 17 more days in the summer that are hotter than normal. All that spells trouble when it comes to managing the stress related to that additional heat, especially for our vulnerable populations, for children who are using our parks and our ball fields, and for county staff and contractors who need to work outside in those increasingly hot elements. Here's another way to look at it. While climate reports may not necessarily highlight Arlington County by name, Northern Virginia is right in its crosshairs. So we expect to see up to 43 extremely hot days each year by the year 2050. You can see from the chart on this page that the number of days above 90 degrees will only increase each year over time. This slide goes on to highlight that such extreme heat causes impacts to our roads, our infrastructure, creates public health challenges, and also challenges to our emergency services. So extreme precipitation is also of concern to us here in Arlington. This map shows projected increases in days with heavy rainfall, more than 2 inches of rain in a storm by the year 2100, with the eastern regions particularly affected. It's important to note here with climate change, we've seen greater fluctuations in our rainfall patterns as well as our rainfall events. So our more intense rainfall events have become more extreme and damaging. On the other end of the spectrum, August of last year set a new record for the driest August in DC in the area in over 150 years. So what's happening here is we're having great fluctuations, higher highs, lower lows, and more extreme impacts due to the impacts of climate change. The storm drain system in Arlington was built out many years ago and is generally designed for a 10-year storm. And even without climate change, if you don't have sufficient overland relief, which we don't in some areas, for larger storms that exceed the system capacity, and then properties and people are put in harm's way. Climate change just makes this dynamic, and specifically the frequency of risk, even greater. So we recently developed the county's stormwater risk assessment and management plan, also known as the RAMP. It is modeled where flooding is forecasted to occur if significant storms come our way, and where we need to focus our efforts when it comes to adapting to this new reality brought in part to us by climate change. Climate Action Plan is not aiming to recreate the wheel. For example, a lot of work went into creating the RAMP. So what the CAP is going to do is point to that study and that plan, as well as numerous other substantial plans we have in the county that have been created and are being implemented to ensure that the Climate Action Plan becomes sort of a one-stop shop for climate change and a reference tool on the multiple ways in which we are currently addressing and we need to expand on our climate action. So unfortunately, there's no silver bullet when it comes to addressing climate change. It takes many different actions to reduce emissions causing climate change, also known as mitigation, and then also through the use of adaptation and resilience measures, we will work to manage the risks associated with climate change impacts, and numerous actions are noted here on this Venn diagram. On this slide, it shows the wedge chart from the current Community Energy Plan, which was last updated in 2019. It shows the many ways we've modeled how we plan to get to carbon neutrality as a community by the year 2050. Part of the Climate Action Plan project will be to revisit the modeling effort and to work with the community to establish what we all think is going to be the best plan moving forward. So coming up next, a few slides to describe the project in a little bit greater detail. Again, it is an 18 to 24 month project. Here kind of describes the scope of the project, making our way through the entire 18 to 24 months. We are going to be doing a vulnerability assessment, looking at our various vulnerabilities that have already been touched on during this presentation. And also, when we're doing our priority setting, we are going to be working with our consultant. There's a tool called the C40 Cities Climate Action Selection and Prioritization Tool, also known as ASAP, and that's going to help us inform our decision-making when it comes to prioritization. But also we're looking from the community for a lot of input when it comes to prioritizing what are the most important things that we should do to take action. Here's our high-level project timeline showing the steps toward what we aim to be an eventual county board adoption of the Climate Action Plan. In essence, we're developing our baseline to know where we're starting from, since we know we already are underway when it comes to addressing climate change. Then we'll conduct a gap analysis to see what's missing in terms of goals, policies, and actions. We'll prioritize those actions, recognizing we have limited time and money, so we can't do everything all at once. That's all going to be wrapped up into a draft climate action plan, which will go through rounds of edits to make sure the plan accurately portrays the interests from not only county staff, but our community before we send that draft final plan to the county board for consideration. Throughout this process, we'll be reaching out to you and other community members as well as county staff to review and comment on the draft content before we move forward on the next phase of our project. In terms of phases, we are listing them here. We've developed an overall project and stakeholder engagement and communications plan, and this kind of spells out numerous ways which we plan on doing engagement. Suffice it to say, we plan for enhanced coordination across not only county departments, but also with our community stakeholders for a robust and comprehensive engagement effort using multiple means to reach and gather feedback from our county departments, our residents, and our businesses. We'll run the project in phases, beginning with the visioning process, as noted on the left-hand side there, and then developing our goals, our policies, the actions that we want to take, prioritize those actions, and then wrap it all together into that climate action plan for county board consideration. We're going to be using in-person as well as virtual events, including focus groups and other engagement tools to gather comments from our community. The slide lists the various means by which we plan to engage the community. As we obtain comments, we'll also ensure we respond to those comments through a dynamic resource that captures the comments, the questions, the concerns, and at the same time provides our team's replies to that input. That way people have a chance to be heard. They understand how their input is being considered in the creation of our final climate action plan. So we held our first public launch event in February 25th at Central Library. It was in partnership with our library staff. It was called Climate and Cuisine. Very well attended. We had standing room only, about 200 people in the library auditorium, and then another 160 people joined us online. So we are very grateful for the participation rate on that. Provided here is a synopsis of the information we want to spread to educate about the community, the Climate Action Plan project, as well as questions we plan to ask as part of our visioning effort. Which leads me to the questions we'd like to hear from each of you on in regards to the suggested framework design of the Climate Action Plan. So we have a list of 7 questions we'd like to walk through with you tonight and to get your perspectives on a variety of Climate Action Plan related items. So here's our first question for you. So a strong climate action plan works best when it ties to other community needs. How can Arlington better connect its climate goals with other community priorities, knowing that climate change is one of many priorities? So we open it up to everyone here for your thoughts. Please.
So often there's in a small portion of the 30,000 foot view, but often in the SPRC process, there's frustration, I think, on all parts when Forestry and Natural Resources comes in and says, you know, we're not meeting the tree canopy, and despite many people talking about it, it gets all the way through and it's approved under that anyway. And then you start to wonder, how long can this go as we go under? Same thing is true with C2E2. You know, they come in with a scorecard, and some we admire when they're part of the way there, but the others, and somehow it just gets passed. So it just seems to me at some point, somebody really needs to say, we really need to bite the bullet here. And we've got all these other things going on in the same vein, but we're not really filling what we're trying to do with them. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been actually been thinking about this for a while and trying to like synthesize that. I think like I've been thinking about climate for a long time because it's an existential issue, but also like it needs to tie to the here and now. And what is deeply frustrating about a lot of the conversation about climate is that it often fails to connect with our shared humanity. Meaning, what I mean is, of course, like in my view, we need to do things for those who will be here long after we're gone, right? But we can't get there without acknowledging our shared humanity of right now. And in Arlington, the shared humanity largely is how deeply unaffordable it is to live here. From a housing perspective, from a jobs perspective, we're having challenges. And to me, a conversation about climate that does not fit within the frame of the fact that people need to afford to live here is one that just is going to go nowhere. And what I mean by that is, well, we look at projects, for example, with housing, it's always like I get the sense sometimes some folks, maybe this is not fair, would prefer people did not live here. It would be easier to achieve other goals if they simply live elsewhere. I do not share that view. There must be a way for us to be an affordable community, but also pursue our climate goals. And so that's going to, require some policy differences or challenges or whatever. But I don't think that we can ask the community to buy into things if we're also not doing so in a way where they can afford to live here and it's practical. And this is, again, unfair, but like forever, Arlington has preached a car-free diet. I think it is very, very out of touch with the experiences of a lot of people who live here. They cannot afford to have a car-free diet. It's not financially feasible. It's not practically feasible. So we need to meet people where they are in their lives, because if everybody's going to be part of this, then it's great to have buses that are carbon neutral. But if you can't depend upon them to come, people aren't going to take them. And what's the point of this whole exercise and getting to carbon neutral? You know what I mean? So sometimes it feels like our actions are divorced from the reality of people's lived experiences. And to me, that shows that we're not connecting with the humanity of here and now. And to me, any climate plan, it has to do that as a baseline. And that's such an existential problem to solve, but also one that I think you have to in order to do something that's meaningful. All right, I will yield my soapbox.
Points, and I think part of the solution is that when we are reviewing a comp plan element, it can't be in a vacuum. They need to refer to and reference each other. And so I'm sure you are already doing this, but sometimes it seems like the elements compete and contradict with each other. So if there's a way for each comp plan element that it gets updated to be referential to the other elements, to say, well, we have our affordable housing element, and here's how our plan specifically addresses the goals that have been laid out in that document, and the master transportation plan. Here's how we can achieve both the master transportation plan and the goals related to climate response. So I think once the elements start considering that others exist, that can help us make progress in connecting everything and having intersectionality of our goals.
Great comment.
Commissioner Bagley.
Yeah, also, I mean, even on and I noticed in the slides previous, individuals contributing their thing. I mean, somewhere along the line, we're not getting it right with even trash collection and recycling, sorting, and the organic spin. I mean, it is shocking to me, even on my teeny tiny little street, with me probably being the oldest one there, with folks who you would think, being younger, that they're better schooled on these things. Stuff is not properly disposed of, and I don't know the answer to it. I mean, it's not that hard, but maybe the cans have to be better, something on the can that, maybe somebody, don't put this in there. And I was dropping stuff off at walk near Quincy Park, so I walk over sometimes to just put my stuff in the mixed recyclables thing was stuffed with styrofoam. I'm like, should I take it apart? And I mean, it was hours of taking it apart. So I had to finally say, no, you can't save the world, go home. But even those, they have a little sign with pictures, but maybe since this thing was stuffed, no styrofoam or, I don't know. And then even there you see people dumping trash and stuff like that. So while we're sitting here at a 30,000 foot view and we really want to get ourselves, here's me and you and Sue at home, and not being part of the solution at all.
Right.
Which I think there is a certain, if you, because this is, he pointed out, is such an expensive county and one that is incredibly rich in resources for the citizens here. Having a home someplace else, which used to be an affluent county, and seeing the differences here. No way, this is like, you got everything here. I think there's a certain responsibility in the citizenry to sort of come along the way in something. And I'm not sure how that happens, but just seeing in that little moment in the neighborhood, that we're not getting it.
Yeah.
It's not happening.
Understood. Yes.
So I've studied this for a really long time. And I had the privilege of going to Europe when I first started studying this, where they're way ahead of us and they would they were managed, this was like 20 years ago, 25 years ago, buildings that they design is, if they're really, use 20% of our, and this was back then. Very simple things like making operable windows so that you don't have to use air conditioning all the time. We have nothing in anything that says that that's a benefit. Like the way we design is just not towards climate change. And the reason why I think this is, and the reason why I was visibly angry for the previous thing we just discussed, the way our system is built right now in Arlington, it's built for developers, not for people. Because if it's built for people, people will tell you what they need. But it seems like, from my short time in the planning commission, that people with money and that have a lot of control and power are driving how things should be built in this community. And speed is more a concern than actually making spaces and buildings that are equitable, sustainable for all Arlingtonians, which is a big problem.
So we have 7 questions. I'm going to do about 8 minutes for each one, just so we make sure we get out on time or sooner after. So let's move on to question 2.
Okay. So when setting our community's climate goals, how should we balance what is realistic with what is necessary? Should we focus mostly on practical near-term actions based on current technology? Or should we set highly ambitious goals that push us to innovate, even if the exact path to reach them is not yet clear?
I think we should
Both.
because I think we already know what to do. We're already doing a lot of the short-term things. We just need to doing them. But if we just do that, eventually it will just be complacent. And we need to have more aggressive goals for further down the line, and especially set up triggers. Like if we reach a goal, then automatically it should be formed where, okay, now we should do this.
Yeah, I agree. The number of times we've seen a project that we acknowledge does not help us get to our community energy plan goals, but then we say, well, we're not able to. We can't push the developer because of the Dillon rule. I mean, that's frustrating to me. So in one sense, I want to be realistic about what we have the authority to require of developers currently, but then possibly the report has a section about like, what kind of lobbying do we need to do? Or what do we need to pursue legislatively so that we can set higher standards? So I agree. I think we want to have aspirational goals, but we don't want to have every single project be failing. I mean, half of C2E2's reports are like 60%, and that's frustrating. But we can't currently do more in this political climate, though maybe now we can in this political climate.
There's, something about bringing things up to speed that is very difficult. So we have a lot of existing stuff, and I'm in the business of upgrading homes for people and trying to convince them not to tear them down. And I can tell you that the process of getting a normal client to go through a simple upgrade to their home is very costly, very difficult. The technology is all over the place. And also, now there's this, the water management, the flooding, issues that happen in most lots are so difficult to manage right now. And so I wish there was a way to streamline some of the stuff that we do know so that we can make those upgrades that we need to make to the buildings, to the houses, so that people are not encouraged to demolish, but they're encouraged to improve and make better. From adaptive reuse to anything that happens to a lot. I know there's a lot of controversy about the flooding, the water management stuff, the footprint, all these things that actually, some of it is controlled through zoning, DES, this is stuff that I do. I think there has to be a study there on streamlining things for people. And we were talking about that for bigger projects. I think the single resident who manages to live here, who doesn't want to move, cannot afford to move, cannot afford to do much, should be able to afford to do an upgrade that is eco-friendly, that is water-friendly, that is, that takes all of that into consideration, better information to them. It is really difficult to do that right now. And very expensive.
So just so are we thinking like it needs to be more realistic?
It needs to be more realistic.
Be more realistic.
Yeah, I had however many thousands of gallons of a detention tank on a 6,000 square foot lot that is 6 feet high and 9 feet wide. That still has to comply with setbacks. There has to be a way to, to help people manage all of that in a more budget-friendly way. It costs $100,000 right now to do water management for a simple project. $20,000 alone goes to the civil engineer just for them to do calculations. There should be an easier way for the county to help people that want to comply with that don't want to throw water into the neighbor or into the Chesapeake Bay. So for me, and I don't know if this is answering this question at this point, but I definitely see a need. People want to do better, and they are stuck with all the steps that they have to go through and the lack of knowledge. Even in the, I say to clients every time, I say, I'm going to look stupid until I don't. Because at the beginning, all the things that I have to tell them to get through a project, it's like, you're not going to believe it. And then, they believe it because they see it, they implement it. I've had to have, actually water management came and we're like, we have to redo the planters. So there's stuff like that that happens all the time, which makes it impossible for people to keep up. And if there's a way to help them just at granular level and of course at development level is so important. I can tell you that it keeps people from doing things.
So potentially recommendations that impact the individual homeowner could be on the more realistic side, for example, but maybe for bigger projects with wealthier applicants, we maybe err on a little more aspirational.
Sure, but the elephant in the room for some of these conversations is the footprint, and I know nobody wants to talk about it, but the footprint is an issue. And so until we recognize the footprint, the way we build the roof, the way we build impermeable surfaces, the way, we understand all of that. And then the system, the integrated systems, I grew up in Italy, and I think I said it before, I couldn't turn on my dishwasher and I couldn't dry my hair at the same time because the amperage was limited. And then, I'm building houses that have 400 amps. So I'm like, are you running a hair salon in here? So I'm just dumbfounded with some of but because they have to, because the code wants each kitchen appliance to have 20 amp circuits and up. So is that really necessary? I'm wondering. So some of it is code, some of it is, I know we're trying to work with safety. When we put all of these things together, I can tell you from the bottom that, you know, where I am with my clients, very difficult to implement all of these things. So I would love to come up with something with you guys.
Yeah.
I'd be glad to.
Fantastic. We'll take you up on that.
I'm good. I'm here.
Thank you.
Okay, well, and that kind of gets to the question one about other community priorities. So like looking at zoning and.
Oh, absolutely, looking at zoning.
Not relevant and. Okay.
Building code, I mean, again, what if you know, if you're tripping the circuit, maybe you don't need to have 5 things running at the same time that suck up so much juice.
Right.
Anybody else on question 2?
And I'm getting off my.
Well, been there.
Okay, we'll go to question 3. Recognizing that Arlington climate and environmental policy is bound by Commonwealth law and implemented through local ordinances, are there other planning, zoning, and policy tools Arlington might use to achieve its goals? So we started speaking to that already a little bit.
I mean, Arlington has always been a leader in Virginia, I believe. So I think we have a lot more lenient space than we think. And maybe it's also time to start lobbying to the state and trying to explain to them, okay, we're doing this, we're a small county. We can make a bigger impact if you do X, Y, Z.
I just, thank you for the comment. We do, there's so much more that needs to be done, which is why regionalism is a really important, well, it should be an important sort of topic of discussion as part of the climate action to influence change. Yeah.
I mean, this is a unsatisfying answer, but I think it's bigger than planning, zoning, and policy tools. Obviously, not to the extent of General Assembly action. That's really where the rubber hits the road sometimes. But like there needs to be enough sentiment in the community. I don't know if you call that a movement or whatever. The conversation, you know, we saw in this recent General Assembly session a bunch of housing bills go through. I mean, that happened because it was years and years and years and years and years of movement over various iterations of General Assembly and local stuff and everything. Even some of what passed is very modest to begin with. And so I think, you know, we can do things, but I don't get the sense yet that there's necessarily like a broad-based movement in Arlington to do stuff that maybe deprioritizes other stuff. I think everybody generally agrees that this is important. Is it important enough to maybe make sacrifices on like things like building envelope, building higher, or like making other changes that some folks may not be as comfortable with, right? Like, because at some point you've got to figure out like where you're going to trade, right? I don't think that the county can do that top down. I think that needs to come bottom up. So it's not satisfying for your report because that's really a community effort that sort of needs to exist. I think for this to really be durable, because the county can do a lot, but unless the community really wants it, it's limited, right? And what the county can do.
It would be helpful for us to understand where we have the potential to get the most bang for our buck, because maybe there are some zoning changes that we could make and ask single family homeowners to do things that might be difficult. But if the benefit from it is not politically acceptable, whereas, you know, big high rises that can all be LEED platinum, I mean, does that make a bigger contribution? Like, are we getting the most, you know, towards achieving our goals if we look at the commercial properties versus single family, or I think we have 30,000 single family homes. If we ask them and encourage them and incentivize them to do something, is that actually like a big jump? Where are we going to see the most
That's a good
progress?
Right.
I also think that it's also a mentality thing. I recently went back to Bolivia 3 weeks ago, and I didn't know this, but they have one day where there's no cars in the entirety of the city. And people just walk and use their bikes. And I kept thinking in my head, how could a country that's supposed to be the smallest and poorest country in South America be so engaged in something like this? And we don't have something like that. And really that kind of thing, yes, it is better. It's not really just about that one day. It's just being aware that we need to make a change.
Good perspective.
Other tools that we can use to achieve our goals. Let's move on to question 4. Which of the following are the most important climate-related areas? What is missing on this list? We have cleaner energy, more efficient energy use, waste reduction and recycling, sustainable food supply, improving affordable housing stock, safe and available water, reducing risk from extreme weather and natural hazards, conserving and expanding trees and natural resources, environmental and health impacts from pollution, and investing in multimodal transportation infrastructure and active mobility.
I have a question. Why did we stop recycling glass? I mean, we collect it separately and we go to the,
Yeah.
is that a stupid question right now? We don't have to talk about it. I'm
Just
just-
a quick answer. I mean, I know, yeah, do you want to
I
explain?
mean, it's okay.
I don't
I think the
have all the
cost of recycling glass was very, very cost prohibitive. And so they cut it out of the recycling program completely. And then Arlington freaked out. And then they said, okay, fine, we'll do it again, but you have to bring it to the recycling glass centers. But it was
What we do.
when we first started the program, I think we used to get paid to recycle glass. And then at this point for now, we paid to recycle glass.
separating glass from the rest of the waste is the biggest challenge. Drives it.
Neighborhood.
And cleaning it too, right? I mean, people aren't rinsing the glass. And so you have to-
Well, people are not rinsing cans
Right.
either.
Right.
There's all the tomato cans that I know Italians.
Yeah.
It's all your fault.
So we do react to the markets, but I am encouraged and thankful that the glass that is collected through the recycling centers here in Arlington is then crushed and used in road bases, for example, as filler. And so that is heartening to me.
I live near Swansea Park and they are, it's one of the busier things. People, constant, which I think is great now. And from what I can see, most of those people that do come, they've rinsed their stuff because it's not real stinky, but it's, I think that was one of the best things we did.
Commissioner Amadeo, did you want to make sure recycling then was one of the top?
Not necessarily, because the recycling business is very controversial in terms of, are you throwing a lot of energy into this one thing and then you're overlooking another thing and that thing is more expensive than the thing so there's, I don't know, understand it enough to promote it. I'm just saying, why are we recycling cans and not glass? It's just weird. Because I know in Italy, when every time I throw anything away, I have to there's 5 different bins and, they call it differentiated collection. And it's literally some of the bins, even for a whole building, they're this small because people are going there doing this and you get fined for recycling the wrong thing in the wrong bin, which is kind of nuts. So, but I don't know if that's good, right? Is that a good thing? Is that something that saves the environment when you do that? Yes.
very
Okay,
much
so
Yeah.
there
So
you
you're
go. Then
reducing
the
amount
European
of
model. Let's look at it.
Waste in landfills and which produces methane, which is a
Right.
potent natural greenhouse gas and all of it. Is that right? So our zero waste management plan is very much, and it's an important component. It is not, Commissioner Peterson mentioned, what's the most impactful? Buildings are 56% of our greenhouse gas emissions, followed by transportation at 24-25%. Don't hold me to the exact number, and then refrigerants, interestingly enough, and then you get solid waste. But those are sort of the big rocks are the buildings.
And we keep approving them. I mean, and then if we don't approve them, we got no place to put
People
people.
gotta live
So,
somewhere.
so it's a vicious cycle. Although the buildings that we are approving, like I said before, it's how many trees you get taken out? What's the canopy? The C2E2 scorecard is okay.
And how much glass does Again, I
Yes.
keep going back to this, the glazing, we were talking about the birds, just have less glass. It's that simple. If the glass costs too much to make it bird friendly, then use a spandrel. You don't need to have glass everywhere. Uh, you know, it just, some things are to me more about common sense sometimes than achieving the best thing you can achieve all the time.
I think for me in Arlington, investing in multimodal transportation infrastructure is one of the top two. Simply because the buildings that we are approving don't have enough parking to begin with. And corridors like Columbia Pike have just been finished without thinking about bikes, which is kind of sad in my opinion. So I think we're gonna have to go back and not just look at transportation eventually with some but also figure out how to not just make corridors that are recreational for bikes, but literally have the whole county be able to be accessible to bikes and.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that point. I mean, transportation being, a quarter of the emissions. I mean, it's not just investing in a multimodal transportation infrastructure and active mobility, but one that works for people in all different aspects of their lives. Like I am very fortunate for the last year to be able to bike to work every day, but that's only because I was able to afford the bike that I have. I was able to afford the equipment that I have. And I'm fortunate to be like near a bike path, and most of my trip is on bike paths. So like 4 things all line up. It was like perfect. Like that is not common, right? And if I work somewhere else, I probably wouldn't do it. If I didn't have the bike, I wouldn't do it. So it's sort of like, how do we make this more practical for people? And it just feels like in the site plans, we're fighting tooth and nail for, yes, bike infrastructure, but it's not just for recreation. It's for like getting around. Like the number of times I've wanted to use my bike to get somewhere because it was a doctor's appointment, but there's nowhere safe to lock it up and I don't want it getting ripped off. Like I took a car, right? So I think that's it. I think what's also missing here, yes, improving affordable housing, but I think it's like making it more feasible for people to live in decreased to live in housing that has less of a carbon footprint. So maybe that's multifamily at some point. Maybe, and it goes towards the housing conversation, which is if there were more options for people to move to meet from a more carbon heavy footprint to a less carbon heavy footprint, maybe they would take them up on it, especially if they were like more affordable, right? And so we need to do that too, because if they do that, maybe they actually live near some more of the stuff they have and they're less likely to use cars, right, to do everything. And so I think that's such a 30,000 foot thing, but like it's so integral because for a lot of people, not driving a car like literally everywhere is just simply not an option, right? And so how do we like make this as easy as possible in like everything we do from a planning perspective? And then at that point, they have to make the choice. But hopefully they make those choices.
And also in our community, there are so many cars here that do not belong in Arlington. They're passing through. And they really don't care as they're passing through. They don't care about speed. They don't care about a whole lot of stuff. And I'm not sure how we can try, and I think we've made strides in the community being more sensitive to that. But because you have this larger thing that we're just a whistle stop to get over to there, and they come through here, and there's a lot of people that do that. So, and they're polluting along the way.
Right.
So, and I would say, being somebody who's a little bit more on the natural side, most people are not really aware of becoming even more grave consequences of the environment and the impacts on our health, especially in this area. It's a type A area anyway. The stress here is off the charts. And I don't know what the cancer studies are like, but the chemicals and things that are out there, the ozone levels that are hitting, they're cancer producers. And I don't think there's ever enough, nobody wants to freak everybody out, but it's a huge thing. All of these things at the end of the day, I mean, and when we get a project in and we're so happy the trees are there and we're so happy E2, C2, C2, E2 has more stuff, whatever, at the end of the day, all of this is, as he said, you know, here and now, but this is for my grandniece. This is for his children and grandchildren. I won't probably be here in 2050. I don't think so. So, you know, at some, like I said, at some point, we have to be very much more realistic and maybe, you know, maybe even with the recycling, you know, and I can't rely on the trash people to do this, but you know, the ambassadors who do it right, they get a little sticker or they're recognized, you know, maybe the grass level coming up.
Everything.
The ambassadors, the green ambassadors for Arlington, be creative with this. We don't have the money, so we got to start someplace else.
Sure.
And you can't really guilt people, but maybe you can guilt people by recognizing some of the things. And maybe then all those other things at the higher level, when we get these projects, people will like, you know what, we're gonna have to ask for a few more trees. And guess what? They'll be able to put them someplace. They would. So, you know, I think we have to be very creative with this.
I would love to see a list like this, possibly broken down into like, how important is this item from like the existential importance of the item? And then how much potential does Arlington have to actually impact that item? And what is the cost to Arlington County? Because maybe some of the things requiring bird-friendly glass on every inch of the building, I mean, that is 3 times the price, I think.
No, it's not actually. So that, I
Well,
think
so-
we should
so
have a
maybe-
session. on
Yes, we should have a-
bird-friendly
Yes.
Honestly.
But-
We're becoming much more adept at bird friendly.
How much
Right?
would it cost the county in challenging budget years? Because then
Yeah.
it's harder for a policymaker to follow through with one of our goals if it is, you know, something that's really, really expensive. And then how much alignment is there with our other goals? So if we have, maybe these ones are too general to be able to do that assessment, but if we come up with some strategies for improving affordable housing stock, and we say, you know, here's 10 strategies, and you know, one of them is only going to impact a small amount of the community, but we have a large ability to actually make a difference, and it wouldn't cost that much, and it aligns with some of our affordable housing goals, then yes, let's do that. But there's something else where it would be great to do it, but we have no tools in our toolbox to be able to achieve that. And if we did, it would cost, you know, $40 million, then maybe we say that's nice, but let's wait until the costs come down on that with some new technology.
Can I just, so the ASAP tool,
Mhm.
it's not perfect, but it does very much what you're asking, which is one of the challenges that we had when we set out to find what sort of tools we wanted to bring into this process. And it looks at cost, it looks at policy, access, our ability to implement, and it looks at co-benefits and cross-checks those. Now, triple benefits, what have you, but the idea is still very similar.
Yeah.
Again, not perfect,
Yeah.
but we recognize that because of our limited resources, we're going to have to make some trade-offs, and to the extent that we can achieve multiple goals, that's where we want to, that's the sweet spot. So, yeah.
Make a real comment. This is what I mean by the way that our system is right now. I live in a building that is 18 stories. We have a lot of glass. And the difference is it was built in 1980. So the balconies are actually recessed in. So even though there's a lot of glass, there's shade. And we have a lot of, like on the 13th floor, I'm on the 13th floor, there's a lot of birds. We never see any dead birds. And the glass is definitely not bird friendly. I can attest to that. But the reason why now we don't design that way is because developers want to get as much square footage as possible into every unit, into every floor, as many units as possible into every floor. I've been in those meetings where you design, they tell you, oh, okay, we just want four units in this floor, and then they go, oh, wait, but can you fit 2 more in, you know? So there are small changes that have been done already throughout history that work, that are environmentally friendly. But now the way things are, they've changed, not to benefit of us in general, but because of how much money can I get out.
So would that be code zoning changes that we would need or like? Or,
I mean, you could make something that says if you have a balcony, it could be recessed, but I mean, that's a really,
Percentage on glass, like some kind of percentage of the facade that is immediately, like the building that we were just looking at a few weeks ago, that is basically, facing Wilson, facing the west exposure,
adaptive reuse.
right? No, it's not adaptive reuse. There's that too. The one on
This is the
Wilson
Spire.
for the Spire.
Spire in Fairmont. Tony's project.
Thank you, yeah.
I would say things like you have to have, if you're gonna have all glass, it has to be all bird friendly, no inlet or glass. And if it's not gonna be bird friendly, then it has to be designed in a way. I mean, I had geese that fly
Yeah.
at my local.
Yeah.
So I know it's possible.
So we can check what we would have the authority to do and what we would need to do lobbying to Richmond, because I think right now, a lot of the sustainability requirements, they have to be incentives to earn
Okay,
extra density.
sure.
We can't require it, but we can find out what we can and can't require and maybe do some
But
lobbying.
incentives is an initial path, because then you'll have people that are willing and they can test it and they can build it, and then you could start using it as precedent and,
Well, and also, I've just started at all the SPRCs now, when they say, we're gonna have bird friendly up till this point, I said, would you please, and I put it on the record, will you please reach out to David Howell? And
It's true. She did say that the other night.
I've
It's
started
true.
saying it to all of them now, and some of them I can see even writing it down. I'm like, oh my God, thank you. If nothing else, there's so many, the industry is evolving, unfortunately, it's super expensive right now, but there are so many alternatives, and best I can see in where I come from, he seems to be our area expert on it. And, sometimes maybe it isn't something that is the most expensive bird-friendly glass needs to be there. Maybe there can be alternatives so it can even go higher. I don't know, but, we need to, if we're going to have all these commissions and all these plans that are supposedly guiding us to this perfect place, he's a free call for a developer who, is spending a whole lot of money. So I think the more that we can throw these things out there in a hopefully, a meaningful and accommodating way, that we have these resources for folks, I think the better it becomes. And by golly, I said it a few months ago and I knew nothing ever happened, but by golly, the last two that I've said in front of everybody, they've come to him, which is amazing. Now, what happens, I don't know, but it's a step forward.
Going to move us to our next question, so we end on time. So how can the climate action plan improve the quality of life for communities that have been historically underserved or most affected by climate impacts?
I'll take
Are you boiling over?
take a stab at it. And I said this during, what was it, Lecky Gardens, that, which was all affordable, that here, there's some apprehension, it's a nonprofit, we shouldn't ask for the same standards on trees and this and that. Why not? The standards should be higher there. The idea is that, why shouldn't those folks who are in a situation where they don't have the financial means and finally we're able to build something, why shouldn't it be as grand, if not grander, than the other buildings that we're, putting out there at, market rate and above? It just makes no sense to me. So, that I just.
We need to start looking at incentives for older buildings in Arlington, where landowners are encouraged to make the modifications needed, changing lead pipes, changing lead paint, changing windows, getting some sort of credit or making it easier for them to do that. Because usually that's where the most challenged, communities live, and they don't really have a voice and or any control over what is in the building.
They are also the highest emitters of greenhouse gas emissions in the building sector, just these larger buildings. Right, just
Just what I. It's too expensive to upgrade buildings right now, and it has to be streamlined.
I think also looking at connections that deal with health is really important, whether it's physical health or mental health. So having more trees or greenery or biophilia in the area is proven to have great impacts on physical and mental health, as well as heat island impact, pollution. I think these are like the minimum that we should be doing.
But the incentives have to be strong, because, when I was working with Helen Reineke-Wilt on the Green Choice program for single-family homes, the program, the pilot, was only rewarding new construction. And so that, so we went to her and we said, look, we are keeping more than 50% of the house. There has to be a reward for that. So she changed the point system to accommodate that. Also, people that are like, oh, bamboo is renewable, so I'll tear up all the floors in my house that are perfectly fine and I'll put bamboo everywhere. I'm like, no, this is not what renewable, what it means to conserve. So also that kind of incentive inside the, having somebody that can come in and guide you through the process, which doesn't necessarily have to be an architect. Like, you could just go up to the county and say, this is a pamphlet that tells you lead pipes are bad, but here's a guy that can help you. Your whatever, formaldehyde, something, your asbestos, something else. And so I know too many contractors, by the way, that just scrape up floors with asbestos in them because it's too expensive to abate.
Yep.
And so too many, they're like, oh, we'll just pour water on it. And so I'm like, so many.
Another thing for new buildings is, for example, adaptive reuse doesn't require an affordable housing, which I think is a big mistake, because if you're already making it easier for them to develop into a building that exists, it should be, every new project should require affordable housing. Because I see people, sometimes they design one whole building that's affordable housing. These other buildings that are just really expensive. So you're already designing a community that's divided, as it is, and you're already putting people. But I mean, I don't know if the county can do that. I think they should, and I don't think they should be flexible on a percentage of affordable housing in every new construction and/or adaptive reuse.
I'll also add to what Commissioner Brookie was saying earlier about affordability. If we become so expensive that all of our underserved communities are forced to leave, then they will never benefit from all of the wonderful things that we do with this climate action plan. So I think making sure that we have affordable housing, making sure that we have attainable housing, making sure that there are different housing options for all different people of all different income levels, but in particular, affordable housing options for underserved folks. I think that is making sure that we will all benefit from the hard work of addressing climate change.
And aging in place, being able to age in place, which is a really big deal in this area.
What ends up happening is a lot of people end up leaving places they can't afford.
Okay.
And then you end up losing valuable workmanship or teachers getting go firemen, because once they find a new community that's like an hour away and they find a job, there's no need for them to come here. So it hurts us on multiple levels as well.
Let's go on to question 6. County Board's February 2025 Climate Action Resolution identifies the buildings and transportation sectors as the 2 most significant contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. fuel use and electricity. From your perspective, what role should the government, residents, businesses, NGOs play in helping our community reach our climate goals?
I think we've kind of
I
said
think
it.
we've,
Yeah, I think we've addressed a lot of this.
Yeah.
Yes.
To do our part.
I have to say that if it seems like the American dream has always been to own land. And maybe in this area, that dream has to shift. I mean, I was in a 10,000 square foot lot. I decided that I wanted to walk to the metro, so I don't have a yard. I just give up the yard. And I think maybe, you know, if you just own a little bit less land, I don't know, that's just a thought. That might, you know, and you get closer to transportation or, anyway, this is just a personal choice that I made.
Commissioner Torres?
I'm gonna be so comfortable right now. So when I did my research a while back, I was doing my master's degree. I realized that businesses have so much control over loans. States. One example I found was China and Mexico. They were really green. And I noticed there was a lot of information about companies like Ford and Honda and, you know, doing the research, but they weren't ready. And so as a result, they were putting in like road bumps for people that had already figured it out to come into our market and to give us cheaper, better options. And those are still there. Some Chinese cars are actually more technologically advanced and better than some of the American cars. And we make sure they
In Europe. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but they're all better, I think, right?
In Europe, you won't, like, you will find a ton of Chinese cars.
Yeah.
My point is, now that they
Electric cars.
figured it out, 5 years, 10 years later, you're starting to see this uptick. That's not enough. We've lost at least a decade. So for me, people that do that have a little bit more responsibility.
Real quick, because I want to get out of here. I think, you know, in site plan, I'm going to keep coming back to transportation. In site plans, there's always the question about, is it EV ready? Is it adaptable? We talked about that a bit. You know, I do think, you know, I don't think we're going to be seeing tons of folks buying EVs over the next few years, although that could change. They're still prohibitively expensive for most folks, to be honest. But at some point, I hope that they're not and they come down and they're more feasible. If we have a lot of, you know, garden apartment buildings in places that are, you know, 30, 40 years old, what are like easier ways for owners to make that technology more accessible for residents other than just redeveloping completely, you know, through infrastructure, right? I'm a single family homeowner. So for us, it's not that difficult other than, you know, rewiring, right? And going through the box. So that's one thing. I know the county did that e-bike you know, lottery. It was very cool. Like, is not a big program, but you all see this. You could like enter a lottery to qualify for, I think there's a subsidy for e-bike, a voucher, right? It's not a huge program, but I was like, that's very cool. That is like a great pilot to start to see if folks are interested and how it works well for them and that sort of thing. Those are not going to solve things overnight, but I think those are like the here and now solutions we've talked about, right?
Some technical assistance.
Yeah, technical assistance, but also like literally, I mean, the county likely couldn't afford it, but like subsidies or like easier ways if it's permitting, things like that, to be able to build out some local infrastructure. Like, yes, it's nice to have a charger at the grocery store, but I don't want to drive to the grocery store to charge the car. Like, that's not feasible, right? So like, how could it be where you live if you don't live in a single family home? This is like not something we're going to need tomorrow, but maybe in the next 10 years, we're going to need it.
I think
know?
people do need it today because
Yeah, there you go.
I live
That
in a
works.
condo high rise that was built in the 90s and my building cannot figure out how to offer EV charging in our building. We have, and I've shared this before, I think, so you all have heard my story, but we have, I guess, a power place, and I think there's a limited number of plugs that you can put into it, and it was first come, first serve for residents who wanted to pay for the copper wiring from that device to their parking spot. And then we're like, well, what do we do when the spots fill up and we've got hundreds of people maybe in the future who want an EV
Right.
charging at their parking spot? So like our building hasn't figured out how to solve this problem. And I think there's a lot of other high rises, and it would be great if the county had some expert that could come talk to us and be like, this is what you got to do. Here's the people that you can talk to. Like, here's how much it's going to cost. Put it in your, capital improvement plan for your building.
But the technology is changing. And so the problem with building a lot of infrastructure for the early technology, this is early. It's so early in EV technology right now. If you look at what EV was a few years ago and where it's going to go, it's just hard to invest that much money because the transformers, where do you put, like, the amount of power that you need to juice up all those cars might change. The requirements might change 10 years from now. It might be that, you got solar panels on the car and it renews itself or whatever. So I'm a little worried about that. And I've said that at the commission hearings. Yeah. Right now there are pilot programs where they're putting them on the ground. So when you go over them, the car recharges. So I think there are things that the county's going to have to look into scientifically to make sure that we are not left behind on how we address the technology of charging cars, because it might not even be electricity, it might even be something else.
Well, and that we don't make it worse on one side to try to offer the technology of the other.
Right,
So
and you're
that's
gonna
the
have
problem.
all those, in those electrical things, things blow, like, right now, some of these cars blow up, the lithium batteries are still really dangerous and weird. So, I'm just saying, technology is still at the very beginning.
Should we go to the next question then, and then we can wrap up? Okay, if Arlington becomes a carbon neutral, climate resistant community in 20 to 30 years, what specific changes do you hope to see in the county?
Geothermal energy, is that something that the county is doing at any level?
Well, yeah, the schools,
They
Uh,
have, okay.
yeah, Cardinal has it. Yeah. We do have some. I think the challenge for single family homes, for example, or smaller lots is that
It could be shared.
it could be there, right, exactly. But so we did the energy committee had invited someone to talk about geothermal. It's like it's not as prevalent here in Virginia. And there's just some access problems, and then just the site related issues as well. Yeah. So I mean, there are certainly some challenges, but one that we're keeping our eye on that as a potential solution. Yeah.
Would like to see more trees.
Good.
Help bring the temperatures down.
Good.
I would like to see, and then we get maybe to an environment where applicants understand that we come in, and I think they do now, and they're willing to play the game. And many times I'd like to believe that, a project comes in better than it, or ends up being better than it started in the beginning. But that it's not such a fight for things like affordable housing and trees, which is the county goal, and the C2E2 person and things like that, where it's understood that it is a necessity for us to be able to live, period.
Right.
And live a quality life. I mean, all the services set us up to live quality lives. But if the environment part of it isn't there, it's not going to make a bit of difference.
I think that we're not doing enough. It's obvious. In the future, we have to start thinking about, in terms of resilient, how to become a resilient community. If there is flooding, having a game plan for where to go. Right now, we have, for example, if there's a fire department. What happens if all of a sudden there's a flooding? We right now don't know what to do. People just go high and that's it.
Okay. Oh, just you can just raise your hands when we get to that one. So I would love to see more people embracing multimodal and micro mobility transportation options, both using them themselves and then also people culturally supporting others using that. The number of times I've seen a post on an Arl Now article about somebody getting hit by a car, and most of the comments are like, those bikers are awful. What was that? How fast were they going on their scooter? What? And it's so I'd love to see people embracing the alternative cars, but then also being grateful that others are embracing it, because then it frees up the road so that the people that do need to use cars can use them. And it, they're contributing to like cleaner air for us all. I'd love for all of the options that we're striving for to be affordable for the average person to be able to embrace and contribute. I'd love for all people to be doing their part. And for when we do have climate impacts, that there are not some people that are disproportionately impacted by those. So, oh, well, there's a lot of heat down in certain neighborhoods, but I'm comfortable in my verdant oasis, so I'm not so worried. I hope we are all benefiting from the improvements, and that no community is disproportionately impacted by the ones that haven't been mitigated yet.
Thank you.
What I heard is Tenley wants traffic jams on the Mount Vernon Trail with all the bikes.
If I could make a comment about water, I would like to understand water better and the role it plays. Like, water is not being used. We're getting a lot of, like, this area gets, as we just said, so much water. That was true even before. I remember when coming here from California, because I lived there for 9 years, and I was like, this is so green, everything is lush. But water really, between collecting, the idea of collecting gray water, filtering water, and, using it as it's a great way to insulate things. It's a great way to separate things. It creates a sound barrier. So more studies about water. I mean, this is something that, I now see that these lots have to have a network of pipes and things to collect the water. I would like it to go somewhere and do something. Maybe, not just, maybe you could water your garden. That would be a good start. People don't even do that. Some people, they do the little dinky rain barrels. Like, I'm talking about no, I understand that. I'm just saying, if there's more of a collective understanding about what water can do, maybe we can harness it. It's energy. Water is, just saying.
Great. Okay, so I think we are at the end. Do you want to go over next steps? And then we'll do public comments, and then we'll all go home.
That sounds great. And on behalf of the team, the project team, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for opening up, giving your different perspectives, your input, your feedback on that. And fantastic. And Jen's fingers are tapping away there. So I look forward to reviewing those. Part of the next steps for the spring of this year, what we're going to be doing is we're going to have a public engagement session in June, beginning May to June. Throughout those months, we're doing the canvassing, the pop-up events. We encourage you to go ahead and go to our Climate Action Plan website on the county webpage. Just type in Climate Action Plan, scroll down, you can enter your email address, and we'll keep you apprised of any and all opportunities to be involved, to be engaged, to come to these pop-up events, come to the public open houses, and so forth. And so we greatly appreciate the time tonight, but this is just part of a much bigger conversation that we definitely want to have. And once again, whether it's a vulnerability assessment and the outcome of that, or it's other elements, we need your input. At the end of the day, people need to see themselves in this climate action plan. They have to understand their role, that 97% of the greenhouse gas emissions doesn't come from county activities. It's from me as a resident, all of us here at the table, and so forth. And we have a role to play in addressing these issues. So thank you again. And again, on behalf of the entire project team, thank you for the time, and to be continued.
Have you
Or are you thinking of going to civic associations at all?
We have Civic Federation included in our engagement plan to be part of that whole process, and we do have a Civic Federation representative as part of the group as well, to liaison on our advisory group.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. And we'll do public comment. I think we have 2 speakers.
I guess so.
Oh,
You get to go
you don't
first.
have to?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, all right, so 2 minutes each and then, so.
Knowing that we're
Go ahead,
standing
Mr.
between you
Howell.
and going home. But since we sat through this meeting when we weren't invited, actually, so
Always.
I'm glad you were here.
might as well do this. Be really quick, and I hope my time didn't.
Okay, we have 3 public speakers, so.
Three real quick points, just to take forward. One is dark sky, international dark sky standards. It's an energy issue, it's a health issue, it's a wildlife issue. It's a safety issue and a security issue. More is not better, and light going where it's not needed or not desired can be more of a problem than a help. So every project, now the new GBIP has some of the international standards in there. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite as up to speed on that one as I am on bird glass, but I think that some of the key provisions are in there. But again, that's only those who go through that process and not everything else. I'm just going to try to find out whether the new beautifully redone Columbia Pike corridor, which has those globe lights, whether they are in compliance or not, because upward lighting is a problem and shouldn't be, I don't know, but this applies to everybody, including the county, including individual residents. Second thing is a lot of these great ideas that we've heard tonight, and I'm sure we'll be hearing through the next 2 years, I think have some staff implications, both in terms of technical capability and experience, but also just numbers. There are a lot of things on the plate here, potentially. And I know that Arlington tries to be lean and mean, but this is an area where it's not the only area, but because I've already said this kind of thing about the whole natural resources part of DPR, but if things we care about, things we want to make better, we have to invest in with staff capability. Third thing is, again, on a lot of these topics, take a look at the behavioral feedback loop. Are you getting, if you have bad weather, are the circumstances for doing, bikes and other things going to allow that to happen? But people need to be looked at as choice-making individuals on all these kinds of things, and the policies go along with that.
Thank you. And feel free to email us and Mr. Dooley additional thoughts, but you had the meeting last week, so you provided.
Yeah,
some? Okay,
I'm in it for the long haul.
awesome. Okay, thank you for your service.
Enforcing the thoughts.
And Mr. Shinos?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to start first with an observation, even though I wasn't required to cover this meeting apparently. I'm so glad that I did, because the 2 discussions I got to witness were incredible. The county board and the citizens of Arlington County are incredible, in incredible hands with the people in this room. The thoughtfulness that I saw behind everyone's comments was, I just wish more people viewed these discussions and had better appreciation of the incredible talent that is making Arlington a better place. So there's that. And one quick comment on trees. There is great untapped potential for adding trees to Arlington County. Earlier today, I and a couple of other master naturalists began the process of reviewing where additional trees can be placed on Arlington Public School property that is not being used for recreational purposes or any other purposes. The very first school we went to, we identified specific spots where over 100 trees could be placed. And so we have lots of other schools that we can go to do that. So, and last, thank you two, Jennifer and Richard, for taking on the monumental task of putting the CAP together. But I feel confident that in the year 2050, we'll be very proud of what you guys do. So that's it.
Thank you very much. And we have one online speaker.
Jamie Kern, if you would like to unmute.
Mr.
Yes. Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, all of you, for the deliberations. My name is Jamie Kern, Arlington resident since 2015. I'm on the Volunteer Energy Committee. I appreciate all the discussions there. Rich, excellent presentation on the Climate Action Plan. I just have 3 quick points. One is, yes, we are a bit stymied being a Dillon Rule state. However, that doesn't prevent us or the county board or anyone involved from asking, not requiring, but asking. And I've seen this in other jurisdictions. We don't have the authority to mandate. However, we have an ambition, and we would like to request from you, the developer, as being part of our community, if you would consider these priorities of ours in your design. At any stage of the process, it's acceptable to say that in whatever way you think is appropriate, but I think that's important for, and I will raise until every meeting, it's important to recognize that Dillon Rule doesn't mean cannot say, it just means cannot mandate. Second point is in any development of any long-term plans relating to the energy sector or where companies are involved in large investments, including housing, it's important to give them a stepwise trajectory. We've seen this globally and successfully where you say, look, this is where we are now and our requirements now. In 5 years, for example, we're going to ratchet up in next 5 and next 5 and next 5 so that nothing's sudden, nothing's dramatic, everything's anticipated and the industry can prepare for it, whatever industry it happens to be. And that is also the way the Paris Agreement has been developed. All the countries who agreed to it to reach their climate neutrality by 2050, just like Arlington, have said, we're going to start with this ratchet and then continue to ratchet up every 5 years. It was an acceptable solution for 190 countries, and I think it's a great opportunity for Arlington to be a participant. Lastly, to the member who is speaking about the European actions, I appreciate that, working for the European Union, and I'm happy to provide further testimony, but while there are a lot of great things coming from the EU, there's a lot more that we have the capability to do. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Please email us your comments and we can circulate them to the commission.
About the European Union. He said he works for European Union or something. He mentioned the European Union.
Yes, I cover energy policy for the EU here in the US.
That's something. Great. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for being here tonight. I really appreciate having you here, as well as all of your comments for the discussions tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. See you Monday. Sorry?
Sorry.